now, you know, when I look at this Congress and I look at the last couple of years, whether it's the government shutdown or the sequester or literally just the fact that we're living with the least productive Congress in the history of our country, I feel like I'm watching that live stream again. I'm frustrated. It's a wake-up call. I think we can do better, and I want to help be part of the solution. You know, I think when you're frustrated about politics, you have a choice. You can sit on the sidelines and you can complain, or you can step up and say, I want to help make things better. I want to be part of the solution. And that's really why I'm running. And I respect Congressman Gibson, but we have some important differences on a lot of issues. Whether it's something like environmental protection. I used to be on the board of Scenic Hudson. I chaired their public policy committee, and proud to be part of their important work and to help to preserve the environment in our region. You know, I oppose fracking and other threats to our environment in the district. Chris Gibson supports fracking. And I think that's an important difference between us. He's actually received support from companies like ExxonMobil that are some of the largest frackers in our country. He believes that climate change is real, which is progress for some Republicans. But then he has signed something known as the Koch brother climate pledge, which is a promise to take no vote, no action on climate change if it will hurt the bottom line of them and their companies. I think that's wrong. On something like women's health, I served on the board of Planned Parenthood in the Hudson Valley. My mom was on the board of Planned Parenthood when I was growing up, and I'm proud to be a loud advocate for women's health and women's right to choose. And Congressman Gibson has voted against reproductive freedom at every single opportunity he's had in Congress. He voted to defund Planned Parenthood, and I don't think those are the values of folks in our region. So we have some important differences. And at the end of the day, one of the reasons I'm running is that I think that the influence of large corporations in Washington have completely dominated the conversation, and they've helped bring things down to a halt. So I'm also a loud advocate for campaign finance reform. I think we need more independence. As some of you may know, my husband Chris was one of the founders of Facebook, and so at a young age, I've been very blessed in my life, and I've been given opportunity that I never could have imagined. But that's going to enable me to be independent. I'm not taking any support from corporate PACs or businesses, not a penny, because I think we need a representative who will do what's right for families in our region and not for big corporations, and not be part of what I think has really been the dominance of big banks and Wall Street in our process. So I'm running to be independent. I'm running to fight for families in our district, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. So thank you.
Okay. We touched on some of the issues that people have questions about. One of the questions that was recurring that I received was the question of you and your husband living in Shokan. The fact that you guys lived in Garrison and at a time when there was a congressional seat available there, and then Sean Patrick Maloney won that seat, and then you moved to Shokan, and shortly after moving to Shokan last year, you filed to raise money for a congressional race. So a lot of the residents here want to know, did you move to Shokan just to run for the 19th Congressional District? No. You know, I love the Hudson Valley. I chose to be here in the way that many people, many families have chosen to make this home. I think it's an incredibly beautiful place to live. My company, Hudson River Ventures, is based here in Kingston, and my focus over the last few years has really been that. It's a small business investment company here in Ulster County that partners with small businesses that have been ignored by big banks, that have not gotten support from big banks, that we've partnered with to help them grow. So I chose to live here and get married in the Hudson Valley and make my home here for the same reason that many other people do. And I'm proud of the work that I've done, whether it's partnering with 20 small businesses and companies like Bread Alone right here in the Kingston area, or the Hudson Valley Seed Library, or whether it was serving on the board of Planned Parenthood or Scenic Hudson. I've been an active member of our community and proud of the work that I've done. And you know, I'm running because I want to be an advocate for this area. And certainly we've gotten a great response. As we have a big district, we have 165 towns, 11 counties, and as we've been traveling throughout the district, we're seeing a lot of frustration with this do-nothing Congress. And I'm really honored to have hundreds of volunteers out there helping us knock on doors and build this campaign. We only have 3.5 months to go, so we have a lot of work to do, and I've been honored to have the help of so many volunteers and voters here in our district. Great. As a follow-up to that, folks were wondering, you know, what you've kind of spoken about your factors for moving to this area. What specifically about Shokan made you and your husband move to Shokan?
Yeah. Well, I decided to make Hudson River Ventures be headquartered in Kingston. So that decision came first, and Shokan's obviously right nearby, and I love it. It's an incredibly beautiful area. I'd actually partnered with Bread Alone in Boyceville about 5 minutes down the road, so that's really how I discovered Shokan. And it's a spectacular area. You know, we're just north of the reservoir, and it's a beautiful area, and it's obviously convenient to Kingston, where Hudson River Ventures is based.
Now, is Shokan your only home, or do you and your husband own homes elsewhere in the state?
We own other homes, and I think, you know, it's been written about. Shokan is my home. That's where I live. That's where I spend all of my time. But I know it's been reported that we do have other homes, but this is where I live. This is where our company is, and this is where I spend my time.
Okay, and if it happens that you do lose the election against Congressman Gibson, would you continue to live in the 19th Congressional District and continue to run Hudson River Ventures?
Absolutely. The Hudson Valley is our home, and we're very committed to the small businesses that we're working with. I'm very fortunate to have Mike Oates as my partner and the CEO of Hudson River Ventures. He used to run economic development for the Hudson Valley area, and together we're very committed to helping with economic growth and jobs. So certainly committed to this area. We're very excited about the response we've gotten in this election. The goal is absolutely to win this in 3.5 months, and we've had a lot of help in that process.
Okay. Another thing that recurred was that you and your husband have been described as being wealthy and well-to-do, compared to a lot of the residents of this district who have been described as working-class families, farmers, small business owners. How do you relate to those individuals coming from a different background where you are now versus where they are now?
Right. So my husband and I have no question been very fortunate, but that happened more recently in our life. We actually didn't grow up in such a fortunate situation. My husband grew up in Hickory, North Carolina. I grew up in a small town just outside of Toledo. My husband's dad was a traveling paper salesman. His mom taught math. She was a high school math teacher. And my parents both came from working class backgrounds, and then I grew up in a middle class community. And then, you know, Facebook happened 10 years ago. So I met Chris 9 years ago. He started Facebook 10 years ago with his roommates, Mark and Dustin. I was working at a moving company at the time in Boston when we met. And obviously over the last 9 years, Facebook has become a household name, and we've been very fortunate. But we certainly come from middle class backgrounds, can absolutely relate. You know, my first job when I was in high school was working at a Taco Bell. I worked at the drive-thru and made $5.25 an hour. And now I've been very blessed. And you know, to me that means many things. One, that means I have an opportunity to help serve. I deeply believe in public service, and I think help serve at a moment where we badly need independence, where big banks and big corporations are dominating our political process. We have an incredible amount of money in our politics and in Washington, whether it's lobbyists or, you know, after Citizens United, the incredible amount of corporate money in our campaigns. And I think we need someone who can be independent and who can be accountable only to the voters. And I also think because we've been blessed, we understand deeply that we didn't make it on our own. We both had incredible public school teachers. We had a family that invested in us. We had a country that made our success possible. And we want to make sure that we're fighting to ensure that other people have that shot. Because as I travel throughout the district, I talk to parents every day and grandparents who are concerned that their kids and their grandkids might have less opportunity than they had in their own life. And I think right now this least productive Congress in the history of our country is not investing in education, is not investing in our infrastructure, is not investing in things like high-speed internet and broadband that could help strengthen our communities. And I want to get Congress back to work because I think if we want other people to have the same kind of opportunity that I've had in my life, we need to do better. And right now I don't think we're doing a good enough job.
All right, you've talked about being an independent voice and staying away from large companies giving you money. How exactly do you plan to avoid, you know, taking campaign donations from large companies? I mean, I know there are political action committees, and I'm told that one that Nancy Pelosi is involved in has given you money. So there's the question of, are you going to be beholden to that PAC or?
Yeah, so we're not accepting any corporate PAC or business association contributions in our campaign, which is pretty unusual. Unfortunately, Congressman Gibson is funded primarily by PACs and corporate PACs, and I think that's a big problem. And I think too often you can see the connection between votes, you know, whether it was his vote to block raising the minimum wage and then the support he gets from the National Chamber of Commerce, which opposes raising the minimum wage, or his support for fracking and then him being funded by ExxonMobil, the largest fracking company in the country. So I think we've had too much of that. And there's a lot of people who are good people who might have gotten into public service for the right reasons, and then you get down to Washington and then are too often beholden to these big corporations. So I'm not taking that support. I think it's been a problem on both sides of the aisle. Both Democrats and Republicans have had too much money in our campaigns, and particularly corporate money, and I will fight for reform, because I think we badly need campaign finance reform. We need to deal with Citizens United. We need to change the system if we want
How
things to be
exactly
different.
do you want to change the system?
So with Citizens United in particular, I support a constitutional amendment. That's not going to be easy to do, but I think corporations are not people. I think corporations should not be dumping money into our campaigns, and I would fight for a constitutional amendment that would stop that from ever happening again. And I think it's not an easy thing to do, but it's an important thing to do. I've been a loud advocate in New York State for campaign finance reform that would increase transparency, reduce corruption, and help bring about partial public financing, because I think right now we need to make a system where our elected officials are accountable to the voters, and only to the voters, and not to large corporate donors and corporate interests. So I will fight for reform, and I think if we want to see action on protecting our environment and climate change, if we want to see action in reforming our tax code, we need to have reform. Right now, some of the largest companies in our country, like GE and ExxonMobil, in some years pay almost $0 a year in federal taxes, because our tax code is just full of these loopholes. And I think we're living in a moment where there are two sets of rules. There's one set of rules for those who have lobbyists and who have a lot of support on Capitol Hill, and then everyone else in our community, small businesses and middle-class families here, are paying their fair share. And I think that's wrong. I think there's a real lack of fairness, and I think people should be angry that there's two sets of rules right now. We need to fix that.
Okay, jumping in really quick about this. One thing that's been pointed out is because you and your husband have been fortunate, you're able to use your own money to match campaign donations. So you kind of have a benefit of being able to use your own money to finance a campaign, whereas most candidates don't have that benefit. So
yeah, I think I'm proud that I'll be able to be independent, and I think the fortune we've had in our life will enable me to do that. But we need to create a system where you do not have to be wealthy to be independent, and that's why I'm so passionate about campaign finance reform, because you should be able to go to Washington, fight for your constituents, do the right thing for the families in your region, and not be beholden to those interests. So it's why I support reform, because you should be able to run on your ideas, on your values, on your stances on the issues. But right now, with our current system, it's so broken that I am able to be independent, but I want to fight to allow all candidates to be more independent by creating a better system.
And then we were talking also about paying your fair share of taxes. What do you want to do with the tax code? How do you want to make changes to that?
Well, I think with the corporations I was talking about, the fact that some corporations have these very large loopholes, the fact that we give away more than $4 billion a year to big oil companies that don't need our help, I think we need to overhaul the tax code and get rid of a lot of those loopholes. Very specifically, I support things like the Buffett rule. Warren Buffett is one of the wealthiest people in the United States, and after talking to people in his office, he discovered that he pays a lower tax rate than everyone else in his office. And the second to him was his secretary, who paid almost double what he paid. And then he suggested this proposal, the Buffett rule, which would say that if you make more than $1 million a year, you should pay at least a minimum of about 30% tax, regardless of whether it's investment income or capital gains. So I strongly support something like that. The fact that Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary, I think, shows how broken the system is right now. And I think if we close those loopholes, if we ensured that people who've been incredibly fortunate pay their fair share, then we could actually lower rates on middle-class families and small businesses. Because when I knock on doors, people realize in New York State taxes are quite high. But I think if we close those loopholes, then people in our area could pay a little bit of a lower rate, and I know that would be very welcome.
How would that affect your own tax rate and what you pay for taxes?
Yeah, well, I think we need to pay our fair share. I think often investment income is treated differently than other income, and I think we need to change that with things like the Buffett rule and looking at how we treat capital gains. So, we've been very fortunate, and we want to invest back in our community. We want to make sure that other people have good teachers and a strong infrastructure and things like high-speed internet. And I don't think taxes are about punishing anyone. Taxes are about investing in our community and investing in our children. And that's something we should all want to do. And I think no matter how fortunate you've been in your life, you should want, if you run a company, you want to make sure that you have a workforce that is healthy, that's well educated. You want to have a society with mobility where people can work hard, play by the rules, and make it. And the #1 driver of our economy in the United States is consumer spending. So a strong middle class is good for everybody. And the fact that we have a shrinking middle class is bad for everybody. So no matter how fortunate you've been, I think investing in our schools, investing in our infrastructure, and investing in our kids is something that we should want to do. And right now I don't think we're doing a good enough job of doing that.
You talked about investing in schools and investing in children and things. How exactly would you change the way we fund schools?
Yeah. Well, there's a few specific things. I can come back to the schools particularly. One project I got excited about in the last couple of years was the 3D printing center at SUNY New Paltz, and obviously that's at the college level. But a few of us last year got very excited about 3D printing technology, where you can now literally print in layers of plastic and layers of metal and create an object in a half an hour that may have taken weeks to make before. And so I partnered with SUNY New Paltz to create the Hudson Valley Advanced Manufacturing Center, which is basically a center focused on 3D printing. I don't know if you saw the story from this week. There was a young 6-year-old boy who was born with a condition where he doesn't have fingers on one of his hands. And they literally 3D printed a hand that he's able to use. It cost about $20 when prosthetics normally cost tens of thousands of dollars. So I think things like 3D printing, investing in technology, investing in training, is going to help everyone. Those are in many ways the jobs of the future, and I want to make sure we're leading the charge in our region and not catching up. One thing that I would strongly be in favor of is investing in things like computer science education. In China right now, every single high school student has at least one required class in basic computer science and basic programming. And in American public schools, it's a very small fraction of our schools that have classes like that. I think we need to expose every young person to things like computer science and programming. That's not my expertise, but there's a lot of jobs there. There was a report that came out that showed that by 2020, there's going to be about 1 million jobs in the United States in computer science and programming that we're not going to be able to fill simply because we're not training our young people and our workers on it. That's a solvable problem. So I would say instead of pushing through the Common Core and more testing and pushing through these mandates that have been frustrating to a lot of teachers and been frustrating to a lot of parents, let's invest in things like this that where the federal government can actually be helpful and improve STEM education and things like computer science. And I certainly hear quite a bit about the Common Core and over testing. I went to public schools from kindergarten to 12th grade, and we all remember the teachers who felt like they had to teach the test, and then you remember the teachers who focused on you and taught you based on your unique needs and your unique interests. And I think if we want to reform our education system, we should start by talking to teachers. And right now, when I talk to them, they're pretty frustrated because they feel like there's a top-down set of mandates being put on them. I think if we want a strong education system, let's pay our teachers well. Let's have respect for them because they're working hard every single day to help our students. And I think a lot of the conversation about education reform now has been demonizing teachers. And I find that very frustrating because I know our teachers are working their butts off to do the best for our students.
Okay. You talked about the 3D printing, and I know that you invested, what was it, $250,000 into creating that center at SUNY New Paltz?
Right.
And that was just, what was the purpose of that investment?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we were excited about the technology, and Don, who was the relatively new president at SUNY New Paltz, saw the opportunity. So I partnered with him and Central Hudson to create this center. And I think it's giving a lot of students and workers and small businesses in our area a real shot at accessing this technology. The 3D printing lab, we partnered with a company called MakerBot, which is one of the largest 3D printing companies in the country. We created the first MakerBot lab of any of its kind in the entire country here at SUNY New Paltz. And I'm very proud of that because I think that's the kind of example of not only investing in job training, but making sure that our region is leading the charge. So whether it's in the arts or whether it's in engineering, 3D printing has a lot of applications. And we saw that and we wanted to make sure we brought that training here. One specific example, here in Hurley, there's a company called Helopack. They make helicopter parts for the Navy. And they were using 3D printing, but they were having their 3D printed parts shipped from California to here, which didn't make any sense. Now they're working with the center. They're working with students. They're able to do 3D printing here in Ulster County. And I think it's giving the students a chance to see how the applications could be used in businesses and give them a chance, hopefully, to find a good job and have more opportunity than they would otherwise.
Okay, because one of the readers who submitted a question wanted to know if you believe the Advanced Manufacturing Center was good for the economy, because he felt that 3D printing would destroy worldwide manufacturing and destroy jobs of people who work in manufacturing. How would you react or respond to that criticism?
Well, I think technology is changing our economy every day. There's no question, and it's not going away. So I think we need to lead the charge. We need to make sure that our businesses are ready to adapt and to take advantage of it. And I think that will lead to greater strength. Technology is not going to go away, and if we're fighting in our region to train our students and our small businesses, then I think there can be positive impacts. And 3D printing specifically, whether it's healthcare, this example of this 6-year-old boy who now has a hand that he didn't have before, or Helopack in the defense industry, there are applications for motorcycle parts and car parts. In the arts at SUNY New Paltz, they have a very strong arts department, and a lot of students use it there for arts projects. So I think that there are applications in many different fields. And I think if our small businesses, if our students are able to adapt early, then we will be leading the pack. And I think that's very, very good for our region. If we don't do that training, then either somewhere else in the country they're going to do it, or in some other country they're going to do it. I want to see the United States leading the charge on good jobs. We have an incredibly educated workforce in our area. We have a lot of great assets, and I want to build on those so that we're not falling behind, but we're instead leading the charge.
Okay. Getting back to what we talked about before, you said you're a board member of Scenic Hudson. You're an advocate for protecting the environment. You said that you're opposed to fracking. I think you know where I'm going. Your husband and yourself have investments, and some of those investments are in companies that engage in fracking, or oil companies. So how do you balance that investment portfolio against your passion for the environment?
So my husband has a diverse set of investments. They're managed by a third party, and it's a lot like a mutual fund. And it's a diverse set of industries across the United States, and they're not stocks that I'm at all involved with picking on a day-to-day basis. But much like any mutual fund, or much like the New York State, pension investments, it's a very diverse set of investments. So we've been very transparent. We've filled out the necessary disclosure to report literally every single investment that we have, and that's up online. I think that kind of transparency is very important for elected officials. But let me be clear. I think that all of those companies need to do what's right for our environment. They need to pay their fair share. They need to be contributing in a positive way to our country. So yes, we have a diverse set of investments like a mutual fund, but I'm going to fight every day to prevent fracking in our region. I'm going to fight to make sure that big corporations are paying their fair share. And I think that there's a big difference between having an investment like a mutual fund versus taking corporate PAC money and then voting for those interests. Congressman Gibson is supported by the National Chamber of Commerce and then votes to block raising the minimum wage, which is something they support. He supports fracking at the same time as receiving support from ExxonMobil, the largest fracking company in our country. Let's think about something like the Koch brother climate pledge. Why sign a Koch brother climate pledge? Who are you signing that pledge for? I don't think that's for families in our region. I think that's for a large corporate interest that has nothing to do with families in New York 19 and has a lot to do with corporations and campaign contributions. So yes, we have a diverse set of investments. I'm going to fight to make sure those companies protect our environment, that they pay their fair share, and that's certainly why I'm running. And I'm proud to not be having those corporations fund my campaign in the way that they're funding so many other campaigns throughout the country.
So there's no plans to divest yourself of those investments or from those companies because, like you said, it's managed by a third company? It's
managed by a third party, yep, and that's something that, I don't play a day-to-day role in, but I'm very active with Hudson River Ventures and with the small businesses in our region, but those are my husband's investments managed by a third party.
Okay. How exactly do you plan to fight fracking in the area?
Yeah. Well, I think it's gotten a lot of people involved in politics, in some cases for the first time. When I travel throughout the district, there's a lot of passion behind it. I think people have thought about fracking. They've thought about how it could impact their communities, or in some cases, their homes. And I completely understand and agree with the idea that we need more jobs in our area. We need more economic growth. But I don't think fracking is the right way to go about it. First of all, I'm concerned about the impact on our environment, the potential impact on our water and on public health. I'm not convinced we can do it safely. I was just listening to the radio this morning and hearing about earthquakes in Oklahoma. They've had hundreds of earthquakes in Oklahoma, in a place where there had never been earthquakes before, and that's been linked very clearly to fracking. I would hate to see that in our region. So I'm concerned about the environmental impact, and that's why I oppose it. I also believe it's the wrong way to go about economic growth. I think if we were to frack in our region, we could be putting at risk some of our greatest economic strengths, whether it's tourism, whether it's agriculture, which obviously depends on having good water, whether it's the reason that people choose to be here and live here and stay here and start a company here because of our natural beauty. So I want to protect those strengths, and I think we have seen in other places that fracking can have a very negative impact, and I'm going to fight to prevent it, and I'm going to stand up to those large energy companies that want to, in some cases, shove it down the throats of communities that don't want it. And it's been exciting to see so many people stand up and get involved on the issue and decide to protect their community.
Have you been working with any of the local communities on the issue, supporting? I know here in Ulster County we don't really have much Marcellus shale. I don't think it's actually in Ulster County.
Right.
So fracking wouldn't actually happen here, but your district is very large.
Right.
So are you working with the communities?
Yeah, I've been meeting with many leaders. I met with a great gentleman named Lou Alstead, who used to work actually at ExxonMobil and then left and became a large advocate on it. He's worried about the impact on water, but also the impact of methane being released and what that could do around climate change and how it could make the issue of climate change worse. So I've been meeting very frequently with leaders on the issue, with groups. And at Scenic Hudson, we did take a stance, which was to protect our environment. I feel more strongly that we should prevent fracking, but certainly that's something that Scenic Hudson has also been involved with as well.
Okay. There's been a lot of debate in this district and in the state itself about the SAFE Act. So one of the questions your readers had was, what's your position on the state SAFE Act, and would you support similar federal gun legislation?
Yeah, I don't support the SAFE Act. I think the way that it was rushed through frustrated a lot of people. It was a big change in many ways, and I think people would have liked to have had a longer conversation about it and have their voice heard. I think, as we saw with the courts striking down parts of the law, saying that the 7-round limitation versus 10-round was did not make sense and was not fair, and we saw the courts strike it down. And we've seen veterans groups speak out against it and talk about privacy. They're concerned about the mental health component. So I don't support it. I do support common sense background checks. I'm a gun owner myself. And I think that we can have a balance between protecting the Second Amendment, protecting folks' right to hunt and own a gun, but also trying to do more to protect innocent lives. I think we wake up too often to another tragedy, another shooting in a school or a community, and I think we should be working harder to make sure that if you access a gun, you're not a criminal or you don't have a serious mental illness that might lead you to harm other people. So the fact that we don't have background checks federally, I think, is a problem, and I would support federal background checks. Also, in New York State, a lot of the guns that are used to commit a crime come from other states. So Senator Gillibrand and others have been advocating for anti-trafficking laws that would make the penalty for bringing an illegal gun into New York State higher, and I think that's important. So I think we can strike that balance. I think we should pass background checks, and when I knock on doors, this issue comes up quite a bit, and I find a lot of common ground with people who are gun owners who say they support background checks, but they thought the SAFE Act went too far.
So when you say you're a gun owner, do you own a handgun or rifles?
I'm a shotgun.
So are you a hunter or just?
No, just basically for home defense. I learned how to shoot. I used to work on a cattle ranch in California, and I went to a school called Deep Springs College, which is in the High Sierra Desert. And I learned how to shoot on a .22 rifle there. We used to have to keep the coyotes away from the cattle, and I own a gun in my home, and basically for home defense.
Okay. There's also been a lot of talk about the Affordable Care Act, and Obamacare as it's called. So what's your stance on the Affordable Care Act? What are your feelings about that?
Well, I think every person has the right to health care, and I think the Affordable Care Act was an attempt to make health care cheaper in our country. I certainly support that attempt, but I think we need to work to improve it. I think the law has been very confusing for people. When I talk to small business owners, when I talk to individuals, they're often unsure about the impact it's had on them, or in some cases small businesses don't realize that they may qualify for subsidies. So I think the law has been a little bureaucratic, a little confusing. The fact that the websites and the healthcare exchanges didn't work very well at the beginning was frustrating, and I was as frustrated as anyone else. But I'd say let's work to improve the law. Let's make healthcare affordable for families in our region. There is a lot to improve, though. You know, the Taft-Hartley plans, the multi-employer plans that members of the labor community sometimes rely on, they're not being treated in the same way in terms of subsidies. I know that in some cases people's hours are being reduced because employers don't want to provide health care. So I think we need to look at those things and find the fixes that will make health care more affordable for people. But I think the big difference between myself and Congressman Gibson is I think health care is a right, it's not a privilege. I think you shouldn't go bankrupt because you get sick. And I think we should make sure that every family has the access to basic health care, and I think it's a big difference that we have. He's voted, I think it's now about 50 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And I have to say what really frustrates me is members of Congress, they vote again and again to keep their own government-funded health insurance, and then they vote to take health care away from millions of Americans. I think that's wrong. I think if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for everyone else.
So what specifically would you change about the Act to make it more affordable, to make it more accessible to the general public?
Yeah, I think we should look at the subsidies and make sure that they're working, making sure that the small business subsidies are making it actually affordable for small businesses, or the subsidies for families that qualify. In many cases, I'm hearing positive things, but there may be improvements there. And I think we should look at the number of hours, you know, the fact that some employers are choosing to change the hours for their employees. We should look at that and make sure that the hours make sense, because I hate the idea that people are working less, perhaps because of this law. So let's work to improve those things. And you know, I'm open to. There's a lot of good ideas out there. And I you know, when you run for office, I don't think you run because you know everything. You run because you have the values that you're fighting for, and you're out there to listen. I think that's the job of being a representative. But I do not support voting almost 50 times to repeal the whole thing. I think we can work to improve it. There's a lot of good things in the law. The fact that young people can stay on their parents' health insurance for longer. The fact that there are caps on the profits that insurance companies can have. And the fact that pre-existing conditions no longer mean you have to go bankrupt. Those are important things. And I don't want to go back to a day where those elements don't exist. So I think we should have a robust debate about how to improve it. Let's look at what's working, what's not working. But every single time Congressman Gibson has voted on this bill, it has been a repeal. It's not been a replace, it's been a repeal. And I don't want to go back to a day where having a pre-existing condition meant that you and your family might be bankrupt.
So as the president of Hudson River Ventures, how many employees do you have there at that?
Yeah. We're a small team. There's 3 of us there.
Yeah. And you all have health care?
We do have health care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it privately funded through the company? I mean,
yeah, we provide health care for our employees, and I have to say, you know, I look at that paperwork like everyone else, and it can be very complicated. And I think it's, you know, as someone who's run a small business and supported small businesses, I've gotten to see firsthand the amount of paperwork, the amount of regulations that are out there. I think looking at, you know, finding the right plan that's going to do the right thing for your employees can be a very time-consuming process, and then dealing with the state and the federal government in the process. So I've seen firsthand what that process is like. I think that will enable me to be an advocate for small businesses in our region. You know, the vast majority of new jobs in New York 19 are coming from small businesses that are growing. So I want to fight for them, not for big corporations that are somewhere else.
And talking about small businesses growing, do you have plans to expand your own business and grow your business here in Kingston and beyond? Well,
in the next 3 months, we're very busy with the campaign. Proud of the companies that we have partnered with so far, and great companies like Bread Alone. Right now, in the next 3.5 months, we're focused on winning this campaign, and that's certainly having some very full days. But I want to make sure we're fighting for small businesses. I see a number of things we could be doing better as a federal government. You know, the Small Business Administration now provides loans for small businesses. But in many cases, when I even talk to small businesses, either people who are starting a company or expanding a company, often that help comes too late, or it comes when you don't need it. And I think we should work to reform that system, because there's too many people with a good idea or with a company that they want to expand that are being ignored by the big banks. And I think we can reform the SBA to work on access to capital and make sure that our entrepreneurs do have a path to getting the capital they need. And I don't think at the end of the day that the government is going to be everything to everyone and solve every problem. But I do think that there are issues that the government should be leading the charge on. I think infrastructure is one of those things. If we want small businesses to locate here, to stay here, to expand here, we need to improve our infrastructure. New York State on the whole has so many roads and bridges and dams that could be rebuilt. And I think we need to invest in things like high-speed internet and broadband. About 10% of the district doesn't have access to high-speed internet. And I think that that's a problem. We can't have our communities fall behind in 2014. So I think if we invested in those things and things like job training, that would really help support the private sector in our region and help small businesses grow.
All right. You also you've also talked about your family. I believe you said your mother was from Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of fighting, obviously, in Israel with Palestine. Your thoughts on that? Should the U.S. change its involvement, or how do you think the U.S. should be involved in that ongoing conflict?
Yeah. So my mother was born in Israel. Both her parents were Holocaust survivors. So my grandmother was in Auschwitz and then in Bergen-Belsen. My grandfather was in Mauthausen. My grandparents actually met in Italy in the refugee camps after World War II, and then they moved to Israel. So my grandfather fought in 1948. My mother was born there, and then eventually they got tired of war, so that's how they ended up moving here. I think the loss of life over the last couple of weeks has been really devastating. I hope we will have a ceasefire soon, because I think no one is winning, or there's too many innocent civilians being killed. Israel obviously has a right to defend itself, but what I think we really need is a two-state solution. I think we need to have a comprehensive peace process that will end this tit for tat. Obviously, that's something we've been talking about for decades. It's not easy, but I would like to see the United States continue to help bring both parties together, to help bring about peace. And too many people are being killed, and I think we need a Palestinian state. We need an Israeli state that can be secure and have the right to defend itself. But I think right now both sides are losing out, because there's a lot of innocent lives being lost, and I really hope that the United States can do everything it can, not only to fight for a long-term peace process, but to help bring about a ceasefire now.
Well, we've had ceasefires in the past, and they obviously only last so long. I mean, is there some other way to bring about peace?
Well, I think the two-state solution is where we're heading, and we've gotten close in the past, and I think both parties need to want to come to the table. I think one of the challenges with Hamas is that they have not recognized Israel's right to exist, and it's hard to go to the negotiation table with someone who doesn't recognize the right to exist. So I hope Hamas changes that policy and joins the PA in being a true partner for peace, and I hope Israel similarly will be willing to do the shared sacrifices, whether that means looking at some of the settlements and having a land exchange, which is what was talked about in the 90s when we got close. So I badly hope we have peace. I think it's important for the world community, and it's also important for families who are there. And I know the United States is an active partner and will continue to be an active partner of Israel's, but also a partner in the peace process.
Another issue that's in the news a lot lately is immigration, and the issue with individuals from Central America coming into the United States. What are your thoughts on immigration and possibly reform of our policies?
Well, I think immigration is such an important example of how right now we're governing from one crisis to another. I strongly support comprehensive immigration reform. This least productive Congress in the history of our country is not dealing with immigration reform. They're not raising the minimum wage. They're not dealing with climate change or passing equal pay for equal work. They're focused on political games, and basically they're not making a lot of progress. So we had a moment of opportunity on immigration reform when the Senate passed a bipartisan bill, immigration reform that would help with the guest worker program, which is something when I talk to our farmers, they badly want and need. It would secure our border and provide more investment in border security. And it was an agreement that the labor community supported, that immigration reform community supported, that the business community supported, and it passed the Senate. And then it got to the House, and it never got a vote on the floor. And Congressman Gibson will not support the bill. It is a bipartisan supported bill right now. Republicans in the House and Democrats have supported it. And our congressman is not one of those people leading the charge. He won't sign on to the bill. He'll talk about immigration reform, but I think we need to get it done. I think there's such a lack of urgency right now in Washington. There's such a lack of, there's no impatience. People are too happy with the status quo. And one thing I hope to bring to the table is a sense of urgency, because right now we're all being harmed by this do-nothing Congress. We should have secured our border. We should deal with this issue in the long run, and instead we're going from one crisis to another. I think we can do better than that. I support the Senate bipartisan legislation. I would urge others to do the same. But right now it doesn't look like we'll be making any progress in the short run, and I think that's really too bad, because these are solvable problems. They're not easy. Immigration reform is big, it's complex, it impacts a lot of families, but we had a bipartisan solution. Our congressman talks about no labels. He talks about being bipartisan. Here is a bipartisan legislation that will solve immigration reform. I would like to know why he doesn't support it when his fellow Republicans do.
Were you born in the United States?
I was born in Montreal.
In Montreal. So you became a United States citizen?
Yeah, I grew up in Ohio.
Okay,
and,
yeah.
And my parents moved to Ohio when I was in kindergarten, basically.
Okay. So you had to become a U.S. citizen
Yeah.
then? So when did you do that?
2005, 2006 was when I got
What was
my
that
license.
process like, becoming a United States citizen?
Yeah,
and now
been through
running
it.
for,
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm very proud to be American. This is my home. This is where I grew up, and Ohio was really my home. So I left Canada when I was 4 and really grew up in the United States. But I think firsthand, having gone through that process, I think it's important that we do provide immigration opportunity for those who are going to contribute to our country, for those who do have a skill set that can help grow our economy. And one of the reasons I support immigration reform is it would grow our economy. It would actually reduce our debt, grow our economy. It would bring in high-skilled workers that in some cases we need. And that's all part of that comprehensive bill that I support.
Okay. You've also said that you would protect Medicare and Social Security. How exactly would you go about doing that, protecting those systems?
Well, if you take Social Security, I think we need to make sure that it's solvent in the long run. I think that there are some small tweaks that we can make. Right now, the cap on Social Security taxes is, I think it's about $117,000. So if you make more than $117,000, that part of your income is not taxed for the purposes of Social Security. So I support gradually raising that cap. That would help make Social Security solvent and make sure that seniors today and seniors tomorrow have Social Security. And I think it's wrong that right now if you make $117,000, you pay the same in Social Security taxes as if you paid $1 million. I think we can fix that. I think it's a matter of fairness, but it's also a matter of making Social Security solvent. And similarly with Medicare, I think we need to protect the promises we've made to our seniors. We need to protect health care for seniors. And this is a difference with Congressman Gibson. He voted for the Ryan budget. And then he voted against it. Hasn't explained why he supported ending the guarantee of Medicare when he voted for the Ryan budget. And he's also voted for something known as the Cooper-La-Tourette budget, which is something that would require cutting Social Security. You would either have to have something like chain CPI, where the benefits, the actual Social Security payments go down, or you'd have to raise the retirement age, and those aren't things that I support. I think we have to fight to protect Social Security. We can do it. You hear the other side sometimes say, well, we can't afford it. But we can afford it. We can't afford it if we make sure that corporations pay their fair share. We can't afford it if we have tax reform. And I think Social Security is critical for our region. It's also an economic engine. Seniors who are living on a fixed income, they're part of our communities. They're supporting small businesses. It's critical for so many different reasons.
Okay. And you've also talked a lot about this gridlock in Congress, how it's a do-nothing Congress, and it's one of the things you want to change if elected. So I believe you've said that you wouldn't vote for the Farm Bill or the bipartisan budget, which readers have said, those are bipartisan agreements. Why wouldn't you vote for something like that if you want to be part of the solution to make Congress work?
Well, I don't think that's very accurate. The budget, I don't think we've spoken about in particular. The Farm Bill, what I have said is I don't support the cuts to nutritional programs, food stamps, and free lunch programs. And I think it's a question of priorities. This Congress, including Congressman Gibson, voted to cut billions of dollars from food stamps and free lunch programs. Kids who are literally going to school hungry, and they can't learn because they don't have a proper breakfast and they don't have lunch with them when they go to school. I think those kids deserve to eat. I don't support cutting billions of dollars from them in a moment where Warren Buffett pays 15% of taxes and his secretary pays more. So I think it's a question of priorities. I will fight to protect free lunch programs and nutritional programs that are important for our community and important for communities across the country. And I would support many parts of the Farm Bill. I think obviously ensuring that our farmers have access to credit, access to land, access to training is critically important. But I think we can do those things while also preserving free lunch programs for students. I think we don't have to choose between those two. We can do both. And I think we can afford to make sure that students don't go to bed hungry and that families don't go to bed hungry.
Okay. All right. Do we have any questions of Yvonne Lahara?
Not really that have come live, that haven't been addressed.
Okay.
I had one. Did you talk to the guy from Politico? Did he find you?
Well, we've had a lot of national interest in the race. We've really been focused on local media. Obviously, we're thrilled to be sitting down and talking to you, and have spoken to the Daily Freeman many times. We're really focused on the publications in New York 19. I think there's a lot of interest in our race for many reasons. One, this is one of the most competitive races in the country. But we really are focused on local media because that's the conversation we're going to have with voters and families in our region. And obviously we've been very accessible to local media. So we decided in the case of Politico that wasn't going to really help move the conversation forward, and that speaking with people like the Daily Freeman instead has been our priority.
Okay. We've got a few minutes more. So Sean, do you want to just give a closing statement, sum up your thoughts about this
Sure.
race and going forward for the next 3.5 months?
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me here. I think this is a very important election, and we often hear this is an important moment in history. But I think that if the next 2 years in our country look like the last 2 years, a lot of people are getting hurt. They're getting hurt in part because of things like the government shutdown and the sequester, which cut things like Head Start programs and our investment in infrastructure and research and development. And I think we're also getting hurt by not taking action on the proactive things, by not dealing with immigration reform, by not investing in our infrastructure and job training. And I think this is our democracy. I think this is our Congress. I think we can do better. We can elect folks who will get to work, who will tackle these big, important issues and not focus on political games. And I'm running because I want to be an advocate for families in our region, just as I've been an advocate for women's health, just as I've been an advocate for marriage equality and an advocate for small businesses in our region. And I think Congressman Gibson does not represent the values of our area when he votes to defund Planned Parenthood. I don't think he's doing the right thing for our region when he supports fracking. And as we've talked about, we have disagreements on things like whether healthcare is a right or not. So I'm looking forward to the debate over the last 3.5 months. We're working very hard. I've been knocking on a lot of doors, making a lot of calls. We now have offices. We have 4 offices throughout the district now. Kingston is our headquarters. And we are doing everything we can to meet as many voters as possible. And we've been very excited at the response. This is the least productive Congress and the least popular Congress in the history of our country. And I think people are ready for a change. So I'm working to try to help be that change, and also to help reform a system that I think is so tilted toward big corporations and not fighting for families in our region. So it's been an honor to be the Democratic nominee and the Working Families nominee, and I'm going to work very hard over the next 3.5 months to talk about my values and the differences we have on the issues, and to talk about how we can get Congress back to work, because I think that's what this is all about.
Okay.
And we're going to close it, so just give me 1 second. Thank you.